Joining us now to talk more about all of this is Todd Furniss. He's an expert in the healthcare industry. So glad to have you with us. So much to get to. Let me start with this. More and more, we're seeing employers mandating vaccination and employees pushing back. Where do you stand on this issue?
Well, I think the question is not where Todd Furniss stands, but really what's the right thing to do. And thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this matter. I think the issue is that you shouldn't be forcing anybody to get a vaccination. And when you think about it, typically nurses are going to be comprised of a greater percentage of people who are either women or people of color. And so I think it's going to adversely affect those populations even more so if you start saying that they have to get the vaccine or they can't come to work. It fails on so many levels. And the real question, I think, which is more interesting, well, it's also very interesting, it's not more interesting, but it's also interesting, is I think the question of this, which is at what point do the rights of the individual outweigh the rights of the collective? And what they're saying, you know, the shorthand for this is you just want to control us, which is what the right says, and the left says this is a question for public safety. And we've had this conversation before in society where we said, hey, you know, in certain instances, the rights of the collective are greater. Smoking, for example, in bars and restaurants and airplanes. In those instances, the troubles associated with secondhand smoke are so great that the rights of the individuals are subordinated. In the instance of somebody wanting to get a vaccination or not going to get a vaccination, the person at risk is the person who's not willing to get a vaccination.
Okay, let me broaden the conversation a little bit more. We're already seeing a shortage of healthcare workers. We're already seeing a shortage of workers in general in the midst of this pandemic. How might this affect the Texas economy going forward?
Well, it's certainly not a good thing, and you're right on target in terms of your analysis of the shortage of healthcare workers. One of the things I pointed out in my book is that we are subject to a hyper set of regulations that make it difficult for us to create more healthcare workers. And there are a whole bunch of reasons that ironically date all the way back to 1910, when a guy named Abraham Flexner wrote a report called the Flexner Report, which did an analysis of all the medical schools in North America. What that did, and amongst other things, it set up all the licensing rules across the country, and it also eliminated all but 2 historically black medical schools. So we have an undersupply of black physicians in the marketplace, and we have a limitation on the number of nurses we have. So it's not good for the economy if we don't have good health care. It's kind of like saying, you know, you don't have good food, or you don't have good water, or you don't have good air. If you don't have good health care and access to good health care providers, then it's going to have a detrimental effect on those companies evaluating whether or not they want to move their business or they want to open a business here.
Yes. So it is a complicated issue with a lot of ramifications affecting really all of us in one way or the other. Todd, I thank you so much for being with us and sharing your perspective. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.